當然同我哋講。即係你講會 cover 幾個 lecture 咁咯，都唔可以咁夠嘅。我都唔可以咁夠力。哦，好啊，唔該，好。反正我都冇冇黑過嘅。唔該。你睇咗啦，條題。唔係 director 要 attend 所有嘅 general meeting， 呢個係佢嘅其中個 statutory duty。但係就佢唔會投票，除非佢都係 member。
即係呢個係我投票，即係佢就即係個 director 就俾啲嘢出嚟。
唔係 hold 個 meeting， 佢係一個人要 call 個 meeting， 佢亦都係嗰個人去 hold 個 meeting。即係譬如我係 director， 我坐喺度，咁你係 member， 咁我就話我哋而家召開咗咩會啦，跟住我哋有個咩決議要擺出嚟，咁你哋投票啦咁然後就啲 member。咁個 director 就唔同，理論上，但係如果佢係本身自己都係一個 member 咧，佢都可以。佢有可能佢自己都係個 member。
咁佢嗰個，咁如果間公司係冇 members 嘅 director，
唔會一定有，唔可能冇。嗱，我哋而家係講，你記得我講㗎，我哋係 assume 所有嘅公司都係 public company limited by shares 嘛。咁你有 share 有冇可能會冇 member？冇 member 同 shareholder 同一種。
其實同一。
唔係我，可能係另一個位。
咁即係其實同埋跟住當我自己個公司啦，我就自己 keep 咗個 share， 所以其實我已經係一個大家投咗加一個 member 嘅話係咪啊？
唔係嗱，首先第一，limited by share 就一定有 share， 有 share 就一定有 shareholder， 冇可能冇嘅。如果冇就冇，呢間公司唔算。
佢就兩個角色，即係佢一個人有兩個。即
係你講意思得一個人封個公司嗰時。
三個人，有三個都係大家投。
三個人係大家投，同佢 shareholder 身份冇分別，即係冇衝突嘅。三個 director， 佢可以同一時間三個都係 shareholder， 可以只係一個 shareholder， 但係有三個 director。director 同 member 之間冇一個 number 數目嘅關係。係啦。
咁我想問咧，咁嗰個嘢，
你記住 member 同 shareholder 基本上係同一種人。
係。只
不過我哋因為有 limited by guarantee 呢種公司，所以有時我哋叫做 member。但係其實我哋一般嚟講係指同。
咁樣佢哋呢個嗰個結果嗰陣時有冇交嘅一個人定係 internal 處理咗佢就算？
你要 drop 嗰個 minute。佢將呢件嘢記錄。
哦，記錄。係
啦，將呢件事記錄。某一類嘅 resolution 咧，要 file 去 common resolution。
係。
但係我哋冇 cover，即係唔使講咁啲。
但係冇。即
係我哋因為我哋學咗 basic 先，如果唔係你延伸去每一個 topic 嘅都可以再 extend 佢做好多。某一類嘅 topic 要submit上去，例如你改個股本，就要submit上去個 common resolution。但係有啲就唔使，但係你要 keep 個 record。因為如果係有人會 challenge 你呢個公司嘅事嗰時，你就要攞翻呢個 record 出嚟，就話幾時幾日 pass 過一個 resolution。
咁係咪如果當三個 director and shareholders 都係朋友啦，即係好似你咩叫 unanimous
decision？
係啦，咁佢哋咪唔使 hold 啲咁荒謬嘅嘢，因為佢哋自己都知道。
咁個 law 只係咁講，個 law 就話唔係用呢個方法去取代嗰個會。個意思即係話，如果電機你真係一個原本唔係開會，但係你哋所有 member 又咁啱喺度喎，因為你哋冇 call， 即係譬如冇話 call 個 meeting 冇 serve day 啊，又冇 agenda serve 到，但係咁啱你哋全部人都喺晒，你又傾咗啲嘢係可以用個 solution task 嘅，咁佢就話你如果你真係咁樣結約都算啦，都可以當係咁解，佢就唔係話俾你 intend to replace 個 ATM。理論上應該要有咯，如果唔係你就有啲怪咯。雖然你話可以，即係你有可能，但係如果唔係全部記錄都係咁， 咁呢間公司如果有一日係要有 third party check 嘅任何嘢跟住咧，咁你就會好麻煩。
政府嗰啲好 check。
bank 咯，或者人哋同你做生意，譬如你想問銀行借錢啊，你想開銀行戶口啊，或者company 有一日佢哋做一啲嘅random check，可能 check 你啲嘢，咁你咩都冇，咁你就麻煩。佢就可能 check 人哋話你係咪唔開會，可能會罰。
咁問多你，呢個咧，呢個係你好似類似 agent 嘅角色啊嘛。咁呢一個係 corporate representative 都係公司嘅人嚟嘅。
唔係，即係其實佢實際上咧，
即係佢嘅嘢好似一樣，但係要有兩個角色咁，我唔係。
唔係應該咁講 ，corporate representative 係因為你引致一個 member 可能係你個公司嚟，其中一個 member 可能公司嚟嘅，公司都可以擁有出嚟，因為佢法人嚟㗎嘛。咁即係話有一個情況下，你間公司裏面其中一個股東就係本身係間公司嚟，咁樣公司只係一個公司嚟，咁佢要有個人去嚟投票㗎嘛。咁佢有個人啊，有個人去幫佢投票，嗰個人就叫做 corporate representative。
即係其實一個係代表
嗰間公司
as 一個，
就係代表嗰間公司，啲公司係一個 new concept 嚟㗎嘛。咁嗰個人咪叫 corporate representative。
咁呢個係任何一個人都得啦，即係我
呢個人係只不過係只係有一個人唔係公司，而係要 appoint 一個人去。咁嗰個人代表佢嗰陣時叫 proxy。因為公司任何情況下都係 corporate representative，因為佢冇唔存在。所以佢永遠都唔會有 proxy 呢個情況㗎嘛，因為佢本身一定係有一個佢要委任嗰個人。但係你本身係個人嘅話，你就唔係一定要有人代表你，有陣時可能你自己去。咁你唔去嗰時，你就會揾個 proxy，或者嗰人就要 proxy，即係你嘅 representative。
啱啱佢講到呢度，我都想問下，咁咧好似話你呢一度就講話佢可以，即係佢嗰個 proxy form 咧，咪可以講話即係嗰個即係佢個 principal 係究竟係要佢代佢填，即係去舉咩手㗎嘛？但係你呢度又話佢可以有佢自己嘅，
係啊，隨你。
咁即係佢係會喺 proxy form 嗰度寫到明。
你係話俾佢都得，你可以個授權就係話由佢自己即場。
如果你寫咗呢個，佢填咗第二啲，佢就揾。
唔係，如果你話咗佢係 discretion，咪佢 discretion 可以㗎。即係譬如你係股東，你唔想去，你想揾你個律師去，因為你聽唔明佢講乜。咁你咪叫 authorize 嘅律師咯。咁你律師你覺得佢會做一個代理最好嘅決定，咁你就唔會限死佢，叫佢投乜嘢。你俾咗佢 authorize 咗佢，可以寫落去。咁佢咪即係佢冇人會啲人嘅嘢唔會 check。
明白。咁另外就係話咧，咁後面呢度講嗰個 procedure error， 呢度咧講話個 procedure error 咧，咁係即係如果佢想推翻佢，就唔可以用 procedure error 去講。
唔係，我呢個 point 係想講 procedure error， 即係如果開會我哋咪好多過程好多手續要做。我想講個 point 就係，如果中途出錯，會唔會令到嗰個 resolution pass 嗰邊有問題咧？
即係變成而家
嚟咧，in general 會有可能嘅。有可能嘅呢樣事係有可能會嘅，但係如果你真係嘈咗上嚟，實際上個 court 點睇咧？個 court 就會睇一樣嘢，你嗰個 error 會唔會對個投票結果造成唔同？如果你嗰個 error 根本對個投票結果係冇影響嘅，就算你有 error 咧，個 court 都會有嘅。
咁嗰陣時即係去到 court 嗰度就要視乎翻你有幾多個 percent 個 share。
呢個其中一個考慮因素。總之你唔好咁諗，你淨係記住一樣嘢，就係你做錯嗰樣嘢，即係你 error 嗰樣嘢，對最後個結果究竟有冇影響？如果你個 error 咁，梗係會有啦。譬如我有一個 resolution 要 pass 75%，我 hold 住40%，即係話我到唔到咧係會影響到呢個過唔過啊嘛。因為我唔到有人過唔到啊嘛，我40啊嘛，你哋離曬都得60，我唔到有人過唔到。咁你想過個75，你又唔叫我，咁我到唔到咪肯定對呢個結果有影響啊嘛。咁如果你最後你漏咗個 notice 俾我嘅，呢個會一定唔係。
漏咗 notice。
即係冇俾我，其中一個 error 就係佢冇 send notice 俾我。咁但係譬如你 pass 咗 resolution 即係需要50%，咁根本90%人投咗話 yes 嘅，咁我投5%，我話會投 no， 但係我投 no 又點啫？咪又係一樣嘅，係嘛？咁就算冇 send notice 俾我，你想 share 咗呢個 decision 咧，個 court 都話冇嘥時間，冇需要做嘅，冇意義咯。
明白。咁另外呢度咧就係話，
最後一條問題
係啦，最後一條啦。你呢一個 redeemable shares 咧，呢一度嘅意思講話咧係咩 ？When where open market is not available。
係嘅。
唔係。
因為你係講我哋 focus 上咧講一間 private company 啊嘛。係。private company 記住你唔係上市公司。係啊。上市公司你隨時可以有個 open market 去賣你啲股票咯。係。咁你 private company 你如果唔想玩，咁如果我哋唔想，點會冇關係？ 你咪對你嚟講咪多咗一個 option，你就有諗，係咪？如果個公司係永遠都唔會同你買翻嘅，你又買咗嗰啲股票，你又冇一個 open market，假設你又冇同你買，你點走？你只可以 hold 住成世都變咗股東，你唔可以自己毀滅自己個股東嘅身份。你一定係有個，
即係佢手頭上嗰啲嘢賣唔出去，可唔可以咁樣？
唔係手續係而係佢真係想賣出去嗰時，你唔同上市公司嘛，上市公司你撳掣你就賣咗㗎嘛，係咪？即係你有個 open market，最多個價唔好啫，但係你實都賣到嘅。但係你睇個 company 你冇一個 open market 㗎嘛，係嘛？咁你想買時咁點算？你可能賣唔出噃。咁你賣唔出，如果公司佢有 option 可以同你買翻，咁你係咪對你嚟講你多咗一個保障？你標時唔玩嗰時，呃翻俾佢，係嘛？咁㗎。
我想問下你陣間先。
一陣
你坐咗喺邊？
光學嗰邊。哦，冇問題，冇問題，隨便查。你都簽咗 attendance 嘅，簽咗 ，OK。Okay, we start the class, right? The first thing is that all of you get the assignment. The assignment already upload to your internet account, right? So I suppose all of you have the assignment. If you have time, just take a look. There's some students worried that, they don't have time to do the assignment, right? They are very hardworking. So maybe let's talk about the assignment on coming Saturday, earlier. So at first I want to talk about the assignment on the last lecture, but some students told me that they want to have more time to prepare, all right, to prepare the answer. So maybe we talk about the assignment on coming Saturday, all right? So everyone take a look first, all right? Take a look. So that won't be very difficult. Don't worry too much. But don't be too excited. I'm not going to give you the answer, right? I just let you know my assessment, right? So how I assess the answer and what kind of answer I'm looking for. So just give you some guidelines, right? But you are not going to have the answer, right? So don't be too excited. Okay. Before we start the class, so let's talk about lecture 6 first, right? Let's have a very quick revision, a few minutes. So what we learned in lecture 6. Right, shares capital. All right. So any of you remember What is it? What is shares capital? I think it depends, right? It depends. It depends on your perspective. So if you're a company, right? If you're a company, shares capital is more about an asset. Because once someone pay for it, right? Pay for it, and then to get the shares, and then you can use the cash. Because the cash, the subscriber, the investor, pay for it, and they can use the cash. Because the cash will become the asset of the company, right? So if you are the shareholders, or if you are the investors, then shares capital is something like your investment. When you invested in this company, and also represent your ownership, because it means that you own a certain percentage in this company. It depends on how many shares you own, and it depends on how many shares being issued, right? All right. We also learned about the different classes of shares. Do we have a definition on the different classes of shares? No, right? Remember that. Always bear in mind, we don't have, right? But we have a general understanding. So if a company uses a name, say like ordinary shares, if a company uses the name parent shares, so it conveys a message to the third party, to the outsider, what it means. Just like the job title. To remember the example I used, just like the job title. When a company recruits someone being named as a CFO, right? So the work duty of a CFO may not be the same in company A and company B. May not be the same. But I'm sure that they are working on something similar, right? But not exactly the same. And that will be the case. I mean, very similar to the shares of a company. So if ordinary shares being issued by company A, ordinary shares being issued by company B, they are not exactly the same. Don't be so certain. But they are, sharing a lot of common features. They are similar in each, right? Okay, so that's what, somehow what we learned in lecture 6. All right? Okay. So let's talk about lecture 7. In lecture 6 and lecture 7, well, probably the most important lectures in this module. Because I'm always telling you that there are two organs in managing the company, right? There are two organs. So in lecture 6, we learned about shareholders. We learned about shareholders. Shareholders control the company or manage the company indirectly. Why indirectly? Because they can only vote. They can only vote in the meeting. They can only vote and then to pass a resolution. So they don't represent the company. Right? They don't represent the company. So even you own a company for 100%, 99%, 100%, you cannot, for example, to sign a contract on behalf of the company, no, you cannot do it. Number 2, you can only vote on certain matters, right? So something stated in the articles or the company ordinance that is served exclusively for the members. But other than that, the shareholders, they are just owners. They don't participate in the daily management, right? But anyway, they are part of the organ in managing the company. Because we only have 2 organs. So in lecture 6, we learned about the first one. So, today, we are going to learn about the second one, directors, right? Directors. So any of you still remember how I describe a director, or how I define a director? I'm always calling the directors, they are manager, right? Managers, yes. They are managers of the company. So they are not owners. Shareholders are the owner of the company, right? Owners. So let's take a look at the first paragraph. So try to recall the very basic concept. The company as a legal person, actually being managed by the 2 corporate organs. The shareholders meeting, something you already learned in lecture 6, right? So they vote and then to pass resolutions on something stated in articles and or company ordinance, right? Another corporate organ is the board of directors. We call the board of directors. So I suppose we have more than one director, right? If we only have one director, that's possible. Then we don't have a board, we just have a director, right? Just like your assignment. Right? If you already ran your assignment, there's only one director in this company, right? Smart Baby, right? Smart Baby Limited. Okay, so if you have two or more than two directors, then we have the board of directors. So we call the board, right? The board. 董事局, right? The shareholders control the company indirectly, something you already learned. Because they don't represent the company, shareholders. Even you are the only shareholder, even the whole 100%, you don't represent the company. You cannot sign any contract on behalf of the company. And there's only one thing you can do, and there's the vote. And that's all, right? You can only vote. You can only vote on certain matters. Something exclusively reserved to the shareholders, right? So you can only vote on it. And then how about the directors? The directors, they enjoy residual power led by general meeting. What do you mean by residual power? What's the legal concept? So I don't know whether, maybe some of you still remember, right? A few months before, some people argue that the legal status of Hong Kong SAR, where the Hong Kong SAR enjoyed residual power, right? Do you remember that debate? Yes. Yeah, right? Someone argued that, there's some scholar in Hong Kong, they are arguing that Hong Kong enjoyed residual power left by basic law. So it means that, right? The point is, unless something restricted by the basic law, so otherwise, Hong Kong SAR enjoy all the remaining authority. It means that need not be authorized by the central government, unless being restricted by basic law, right? So this is the point from some of the scholars. But, and some other scholars, they argue that, no, Hong Kong is not enjoying residual power. Everything needs to be authorized, right? If Hong Kong SAR not being authorized, it means that you cannot do it, right? Okay, I suppose that's something you already learned in the Hong Kong legal system. Well, that's the question of public law, right? I'm teaching company law. So I'm not going to discuss on it anymore. But the same concept here. The directors enjoy residual power, very certainly, right? It means what? So if you want to know whether a director or the board of directors, whether they can do something, or not. So you don't have to check the articles, and you don't have to check the company ordinance, whether the director is being authorized to do that thing, right? For example, you are thinking, whether the director can employ staff, or whether the director can make a decision for the company, and whether directors can sign a contract, right? For example, you want to know, because you're a lay person, right? You don't know anything about company law, so you want to know. You need to check the company law and see whether the director is being authorized to do something like this. You don't have to, right? You don't have to. You only need to check one thing, whether, that issue you are concerned, right? Say like signing a contract, whether that thing being reserved by the company ordinance or the articles for the members, right? If that thing not being reserved for the members under the article of company law, then the directors, they enjoy residual power. It means that they can do. So directors enjoy residual power. It means that unless something stated otherwise, then they can do it. Right? So they don't have to be authorized to do something. They enjoy all the residual authority, apart from those reserved for members. Right? So that's a very important concept. So I hope that you bear in mind. Right? Remember that. So the directors, they manage all the affairs of the company, save for those reserved for the general meeting. General meeting means members, right? Means members. So always remember that it's very important legal concept. So when you are studying law, you have to remember, you need to have a very clear conceptual understanding on all the legal principles, right? And based on legal principle, to make some inference or conclusion, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the definition of director. We have a definition of director. we can define a director from the functional perspective, right? By looking at the functions. You know, for example, right? For example, if we are not studying law here, if we are studying for MBA, right? It's an MBA degree. We are studying management. We are studying business. Then what mean by a director will be an individual who oversees the management of the affairs of the company. So it means the one who manages the company. What are the difference between a director and a CEO? So CEO is supposed to be one who manages the company, right? So someone being named as a CEO, another person is a director. That CEO is not a director, right? That CEO is not a director. Then another person being named as a director. What the difference between the two? If you are the employee of a company, or if you are the outsider of the company, and the implications to these two guys here, right? You're Angela. So Angela, she's a director, and Simon is a CEO. So I'm an outsider. What the difference when I'm dealing with these two persons? In law, of course, right? In law, what the difference between two persons here? She's CEO, Angela is CEO, right? You're sorry. You're CEO, right? So you're CEO, right? And you're director. So what the difference? If I'm the third party, what the difference? Or you feel if you are the employee, right? So one guy is a CEO and another guy is director. They start taking instructions from the people. Who's your boss? Who's your boss? Legally, of course, right? Legal speaking. What the difference? Well, no difference. That's my boss, right? So anyone who pay me is my boss. When I get a paycheck, that person is my boss. I don't care. I don't care your title, right? I don't care. Your COO, CFO, CMO, OO, I don't care, right? So why did I get a paycheck? When I get paid, and you are my boss, right? So you think about it. So legally speaking, you think about the composition of a company, directors and shareholders. So they form the company. Right? So a director is part of the company. But the CEO, if a CEO is not a director, right? The CEO can also be a director. But suppose the CEO is not a director. So it means that the CEO is only an employee. And the CEO is having a contract with the company. But the CEO is not part of the company. Right? So when you are dealing with CEO, you have to think about the impact of the contract. So whether this person being authorized to do anything, right? When you are dealing with the CEO. Because when you are dealing with a CEO, you are not probably dealing with a company. You are dealing with someone. The company is having a contract with the CEO, and then you deal with the CEO. So there is something in between, right? But you deal with the director, third party, right? When you deal with the director, it means you are dealing with a company directly. Because in law, a director is one to represent the company, right? And director is a part of the company. A company without directors cannot be a company. But a company is not necessarily to have CEO. The CEO is only a job title, all right? So how to define director? Functional speaking, someone who manages the company, right? But that is only an interpretation or definition based on the operational sense. So how about the legal definition, right? So that's what we need to concern about. So what is the legal definition? Director is statutory position again, right? You had that before, statutory position. So what we mean by statutory position? Is it CEO? Do you think CEO is statutory position? No. CEO probably is a required position. It means that if you are helping a big company, right, a big enterprise, then you need someone to be CEO, to manage everything. From the functional perspective, you need an HR manager to handle all the personnel affairs, right? And you need a CFO to take care of the financial stuff. But that is only a functional requirement, and that's not a legal requirement, right? So it means that without HR manager, you can still have a company legally, perfectly. But director is a statutory position means two things. As I told you before, I hope that you still remember. Number one, statutory position means that you have to have it. You don't have a choice. When you don't have a director, you don't have a company, right? A company without a director is not a company at all. So that's required. That's the first meaning. Another one, statutory position means the liabilities and authority of this person being divided by the law. So unlike the CEO, the liability properly and the authority of the CEO being divided by what? Employment contract, right? Because CEO is not part of the company. CEO is a person employed by the company. So its authority are being governed by employment contract. But for a director, the authority and the liabilities being divided by the law. And that's why we call director as a statutory position, right? 法定嘅職位. Okay, so that's the first part. And I suppose you understand, right? So it's not difficult to understand statutory positions. Because apart from director, company secretary is also a statutory position, if you still remember, right? If you still remember. Okay, but that is not the main concern, because statutory position is, rather straightforward concept, not really difficult to understand. So the second part means a lot. Why? It includes any position, it includes any person occupying the position of director by whatever name called it. But I'm copying from the law exactly, section 2 of the company ordinance, right? So that's not my creation. That's not my own words. I copy from the law directly. I copy from the company ordinance directly. So company ordinance defines a director as someone occupying the position of director by whatever name called it. How do you feel about a definition like this? 你覺得係咩? What is it? Include, number one, any person. 即係任何人啦，係咪? Occupying the position. So whether you will be a director depends on whether you are in the position of a director. By whatever name called it. So it means what, how you being called, how you being described, how you being addressed. It's not the main concern in the company ordinance, but your actual function, right? With the law defines someone as a person occupying the position. It means you are really in that position. Do you remember a legal concept? I'm always telling you again and again in common law. Forms and substance, right? So in common law, normally we care about what? Substance. Normally, right? There are exceptions. Right? There are always exceptions. In certain situations, we care about the form, but not the substance. For example, a company, right? If you want to set up a company, you need to have registration. So you cannot argue that I set up a company substantially, even without the form. No, that will be rejected by the law, right? Rejected by the court. No, not accepted. But apart from that, most of the time we conserve substance, but not the form. It means actually what is it, but not how you call it, right? Do you remember an example I used regarding employment? Whether you are having a job title, it doesn't matter. Whether you are being described as an employee, it doesn't matter. The court look at the real function. If you are getting your paycheck every month, if you are taking instruction from a supervisor, right? If you work on a fixed hour, then the court assumes that you are an employee, right? Even you are not being called as an employee, it doesn't matter, right? Because the court concerns substance. All right. I think that will be somehow the same thing. So let's think about it in details. Normally, how a person become a director? Normally, appointed, right? Apart from the first director, do you remember the incorporation procedures? When you set up a company, you have to name someone as director. So that person will become director. Once the company being incorporated, even without appointment, because the company is not yet here. So you just name someone, right? But apart from the first director, or the first few directors, right? So all the subsequent directors should be appointed. So normally, how you become a director? Appointed, right? Because you are being appointed as a director for court. Right? Easy, right? We understand that, no problem. So normally, a person being appointed, if a person must be appointed in order to become a director, then we don't have to waste time to ask a question like this: who is a director? Because it means that we only consider the form. If you are publicly appointed, then you are a director. If you are not publicly appointed, then you are not a director, right? So that would be very easy. We don't have to ask a question like this because it's stupid. For example, marriage, right? You don't have to ask a lot of silly questions whether they are married, because you only need one thing to prove: the marriage certificate, right? And that's all. But we need to ask the question: who is a director? It means that, of course, a director can be appointed, right? Of course, if you are being appointed, you are a director, no doubt, right? No doubt, you are a director, absolutely. But it is not a must. I mean, not necessarily. Because legally speaking, a person can be regarded as a director if, right, under two conditions. He hold out claiming to be, or undertaking and, right, holding out claiming to be and undertaking the function of the director, or controlling the other directors. So it means sometimes, right, sometimes, when you're holding out or claiming, it means you're telling everyone, I'm a director of this company, right? Or so I have a business card, and my title being printed here, Edward Tong, Director of All New Space Limited, right? I never been appointed, but I, deliver my business card to everyone and claiming that I'm a director, right? It means holding out claiming means I'm telling everyone I'm a director. And at the same time, you are actually functioning as a director. For example, if you participate in a company, right? You work with other directors. You work with other real directors. Those directors, they are publicly appointed. You work with them. You participate in the decision-making process. Right? You also join the board of directors. Then in that kind of situation, in law, you will be regarded as a real director. Right? Number one. Number two, when you control the other directors. When the other directors being publicly appointed, they take instruction from you. So even you are not publicly appointed, but in law, you will be regarded as director. Right? So that's a person may be treated in law as a director without any title, no appointment. As I told you before, right, and I'm always saying, if a director must be appointed, then that will be easy. You don't have to waste time to learn about the definition of director. But it is not, right? Sometimes, even you are never being appointed, and without holding any real title, right? Without holding any real title, but if you can fulfill all the conditions here, then you will be regarded in law as director, as a very special kind of director, de facto director or shadow director. So let's take a look what it means. What means a de facto director? It means, yeah, actually, you are director, right? Fact, something like fact, in fact, something like in fact you are director, right? Even you are not holding the title, even you are not having the appointment. But in fact, you are a director, right? You are a director. So we have a very good definition here from the court. The court defines the de facto director as, so someone assumed to act as a director, but most importantly, holding out as a director and claiming to be a director, right? It means that you're telling everyone that I'm a director, right? I'm a director. So trust me. And also, that person undertook the function of a director that could properly be described only by a director. It means you are doing something that only the directors will do. Say like you are participating in a board of directors. You work with other real directors and you make decisions with other directors. Right? So you claim yourself to be a director and you are actually working like a real director. Then in law, you will be regarded as a director. Regarded as a de facto director. 事實上嘅董事，實務上嘅董事。So it means the person who has been claimed as a director, actually carrying out the function as a director, and he will be treated as a director, even without appointment, right? Even without appointment. So that's how the law defines de facto director, right? Any problem? Okay. But we have another kind of director. So this kind of director need not to be appointed, but also in law to be regarded as a director. So we call this kind of director a shadow director. So how do you think what we mean by shadow director? Right, something like this, right? We have a definition in company ordinance. So when we look at section 2, the company ordinance defines the shadow director is a person where his directions and instructions will be followed by the directors of the company. So it means that if someone, someone's instructions will be followed by the real directors. Real directors mean the director being publicly appointed. I'm not being publicly appointed, but the real directors here take my instructions, right? But that's possible. I'll give you one example. So think about Changgang. You know Changgang, right? Changgang Jiaxun. The property developer, largest one, right? Big enterprise of the Mr. Lee family. Mr. Lee Ka-shing, he retired already. Last year, right? He retired in the AGM of Changgang. And Victor Lee now is the chairman, right? So he already decided from the board. So supposedly he's not the boss, right? But if you work in Changgang, and Mr. Lee Ka-shing tell you to do something, you are one of the directors, right? Do you think that you will take his instruction? Yes, of course. Right? But you know that legally speaking, he resides of course, right? His family is still in control of his company. And his son, Victor Lee, is now the chairman. And you know that Mr. Lee Ka-shing is the father of the chairman. It means he's the boss of your boss, right? He's the boss of your boss. So do you think that you will take instruction from him? Absolutely, I will, right? I will. If I'm an employee, I was once an employee, no longer an employee, right? I'm no longer, because I'm now a barrister, but before I joined the legal profession, I was once an employee. And I know the secret to be a good employee, how to survive the company. What is it? There's only one principle, to make your boss happy, right? It doesn't matter, you are a good employee or whether you are a competent person, it doesn't matter, right? Your boss like you, then you will be fine, right? You can secure your rice bowl, right? You can secure your paycheck if your boss like you, right? That's all, right? There's only one rule, one single rule to surviving a corporate structure. Make sure that your boss like you. So you think about Mr. Lee Ka-shing. Even he resigned from the board, he's no longer a director. But you think about all the real directors in the board. I'm sure that all of them still take instruction from Lee Ka-shing. Right? So, properly, Lee Ka-shing in company law will be regarded as a shadow director. Of course, right? Of course. It usually refers to a long period of time, but not a single occasion. If you take instruction from someone just on, one single occasion, based on accommodate may not be a shadow director because you are just seeking for, say, like a professional advice, right? You are taking instruction from a professional, maybe a lawyer, or financial advisor, right, or CPA, then you are just taking for professional advice. I refer to a relatively long period of time. So the underlying rationale is that why we have such a concept of shadow directors? Because you want to find out who's in real control as a puppet masters, right? 控制都冇講, right? As a real puppet masters. So point out to a person who want to control the company by controlling the directors, but keep himself hidden. Because that's a very important concept in common law, form and substance. So we always concern about substance. So we want to know who is the real controller, who's really controlling the company. So that's why we have this concept, right? So otherwise, someone can, evade the liability by appointing, some nominee to be the directors. So in case something wrong, they will be the guy to be suitable nominee, right? But I can issue instructions. I can manage all these real directors, but I, hiding behind under the dark shadow, right? So that's not allowed because in common law we consider the real thing, right? Real thing. So we have a concept of shadow directors. So what are the legal implications regarding shadow directors and the de facto directors? So in the above cases, remember, such a person, right? Such a person means the person regarded as a shadow director, or that person being regarded as a de facto director, will be treated as a real director of the company. And as a result, being bound by the duties and obligations of the director stated in the company ordinance, right? So it means that, right? It means that all the restriction imposed on the director will also be imposed on that shadow director, de facto director, even you never being properly appointed, right? It means you will be liable. But don't mix up another concept, right? Don't mix up. Because in company law, for example, for a public company, right? For a public company, the law states that there must be at least 2 directors, right? 2 directors. Then Simon being appointed as one of the directors. Angela being regarded as a shadow director, because Angela can control Simon. It doesn't mean that you fulfill the minimum number of directors based on the law. You will not be counted. Do you get my point here? Right? Public company, for example, public company, right? Public company require 2 directors, right? Require 2 directors. The 2 directors means 2 appointed directors. Right? 2 appointed directors. 2 directors with proper appointment. Shadow director and de facto directors, they will not be considered in order to fulfill the numbers here. Shadow directors and de facto directors is only a legal concept, right? To make sure that someone will be responsible, just like other directors, regarding their liabilities. Because you are functioning like a director, right? But because in paper you are not a director. So a shadow director, de facto director, shall not be counted as a minimum numbers on the directors, right? Do you get my point here? It's only a concept to make you liable for something, right? To make you liable for something. Okay, so that's all about the definition of the director. So how about appointment of directors? Of course, the director can be appointed, right? What we learned regarding shadow directors and de facto directors, it means that even you are not being properly appointed, but maybe you will be liable as a director, right? Even without appointment. But normally, we still need to appoint directors. Because for example, in public company, right, as I told you, you need to have at least 2 directors. And even for a public company, you need to have 1 director, at least. And sometimes we need to have more directors, right? So we still need to learn how to have the director, of course, appoint, We appoint directors. But the first thing is, how about the minimum number of directors? Do we have a minimum number of directors? The answer is yes. For a public company, I just told you, and a company limited by guarantee, we must have at least 2 directors. That's being stated in the law, right? And that director, the 2 directors must be appointed, not shareholder. Not shadow director, not de facto director, but appointed director, right? Only appointed director will be counted in order to fulfill the requirements here. And for a private company, there's only one. You only need to have 1 director, right? For a private company. The company registry, CR means company registry, right? OCGRG, can direct company to appoint an additional director in order to comply with the statutory requirements, right? If they are being alerted, but normally they don't know. Normally they don't know, unless someone complains to the company registry, or when they are doing the random check. Sometimes they have a random check, right? So ask you to submit all the documents to see that whether your company fulfill all their requirements, right? So sometimes they have a random check, but normally they don't know unless someone complains to the company registry. But anyway, if they learn about it, right, you are not fulfilling the minimum requirement, they are going to send notice to you to ask you to make an appointment, right? And then to file all the records. So if you are not complying with their requirement and you commit an offense, and there will be penalty, right? There will be penalty. So remember, a few $1,000s. So sometimes when you check the company ordinance, you check that when you are not doing something, you are subject to a penalty. Then you are not. So you don't have exactly the numbers of the penalty, but you will have something like penalty level 1 or level 2, something like this, right? So you'll find something like this in the company ordinance or other ordinance. So where to find what it means by level 1 or level 2? You check another legislation, right? We call it Criminal Procedure Ordinance, right? Criminal Procedure Ordinance. And at the end, at the appendix of the Criminal Procedure Ordinance, then you find a table which stated that what it means for level 1, level 2, and level 3, right? So you can check. Do you know where to find the ordinance? You can find a website, HKLII, or the DOJ. DOJ means Department of Justice. So you can find all the ordinance in Hong Kong on the DOJ website or HKLII. HKLII being managed by the Free Law School in Hong Kong, right? So you can find all the ordinance and lots of legal materials here. So I always use this website, free of charge. Okay? So we have a minimum number of directors. I want to ask you a question, whether we have a minimum number of shareholders. Do we have a minimum number of shareholders? No? Yes. That is one. Yes, right? That is one. But it's not possible to have a company without shareholders. The shareholder is an owner. A company must be owned by someone, right? So the minimum number is 1. But for a private company, the maximum number will be 50, right? 50, right. Then I ask you another question. Do we have a maximum number of directors? Yes or no? We have a maximum number of shareholders for a private company, and we don't have it for a public company, right? I ask you a question whether we have a maximum number of directors for all kinds of companies. Do we have a maximum number? 有冇最高？有最少 right? You understand? We have the minimum. Do we have a maximum? No, we don't have, right? So in theory, you can employ 1 million directors, right? 100萬個 directors, right? So you book the 紅磡體育館開會, right? So how to appoint? Of course, you just learned that you can appoint directors, right? But how to do it? Regarding appointment, when we talk about appointment of directors, so you need to have a key conceptual understanding first. You have to understand the difference between the initial directors and subsequent appointment of the directors. So I hope that you still remember, right? I just mentioned to you a few minutes before. you can still recall what we learned in lecture 3 regarding the incorporation of the company, right? Mary, right? You still remember? I'm not able to. So if you can still recall the procedures to incorporate a company, when you incorporate a company, you have to file some forms. You have to file the articles, right? You have to pay the fees, right? And the incorporation form, right? Very important incorporation form. So in the form, so you have to state some information, like the capital structure of your company, right? The nature of your company, whether you are incorporating public company or what, right? So how many shares being issued, how many directors, and one thing you have to state who will be the directors of this company, right? So the first director or the first few directors, they are just being what? Named in the form. And without any procedure of appointment, right? They're just being named in the form. If there are someone being named in the form, then they will be directors of the company, right? So that's what we call the initial directors. Initial directors. So you have to understand that sometimes when you check the corporate files, right? Sometimes when you want to acquire a company, when you want to buy a company, you have to do something we call due diligence. DD, it means you have to check all the corporate records of this company before you acquire the company, right? Before you purchase the company, before you merge with the company. So you have to check all the appointment record, of course, one of it, right? The basic routine. You have to check about all the appointment of the directors. But don't be silly. You know, some of the directors you can never find their record for appointment. It doesn't mean that they are not directors, right? Why? Because they are initial directors. They are just being named in the incorporation form. They are not being appointed, right? So you need to have that concept in mind. When we look at the first paragraph, with effect from the date of incorporation of a company, the first director or the first directors, true or false, right? The first one or the first few directors, right? It depends on the nature of the company. Of a person being named as a director in the incorporation form delivered to the CR, and that's all. Alright? No appointment, just named it. Right? And if you are being named it, then you will become director. But you have to sign on it that you consent with your in the status as a director, you have to sign on the incorporation form as a director, right? It means you consent if you are willing to be a director, right? Something like this. Well, apart from the initial directors, we have to understand subsequent appointment. It means that, right? It means that except for the initial directors, they are just being named in the incorporation form. And all the subsequent directors should be appointed normally, right? Normally should be appointed. So we have to understand another concept we call subsequent appointment. So a company has the power to appoint directors for what? Vacancy. So sometimes you understand what you mean vacancy, right? What we mean by vacancy, it means to replace someone. If someone retired, someone, got killed, I don't understand, right? Disappeared. Right? So sometimes it's for replacement, right? Replacement. So sometimes you are having an additional director. Because you have to remember that unless being restricted by the article, so you can restrict the maximum number of directors in the article. You can do so. Because the company ordinance is silent on it. Right? The company ordinance is silent. If the company ordinance is silent, it means that's up to you. Right? You can drop your own articles. So unless you have some restriction as to the maximum number of directors, otherwise you can appoint, 1 million director or 2 million directors. So no one cares about it. So you can always appoint an additional director. Right? So sometimes to replace the vacancy, sometimes as an additional director. So why it matters? Because a board of directors. But we learned that, right? We learned that in the general meetings, the shareholders vote in order to pass resolution. When they pass resolution, it means that they can do something, right? They can achieve something. For example, to change the name of the company, that you have to pass order resolution. So we have a concept called order resolution 50%, and we have special resolution 75%, right? In general meeting for shareholders. But don't mix up with the board of directors. And in the general meeting, we have what? Vote by poll, vote by show of hands. Show of hands means count, head count, right? Show of hands. And poll means to count the shares, right? One share, one vote, right? Show of hand, one hand, one vote, right? How about the board of directors? How they vote? They also vote, right? For example, there are 5 directors in the board of directors. They want to make decisions whether we are going to sign a contract with another company. So how they make decisions? Number one, they don't have poll voting. They don't have show of hand. They don't have poll voting. They only have show of hand, right? Because they don't have shares in the board of directors. Even they are members and they have shares, their shares will be ignored, right? No one cares about shares in the board of directors. Even you don't have any shares at all, and you hold 99% of shares. I don't have any shares at all. You have one hand, I have one hand. Provided that we are in the board of directors, right? So in the board, we only have show of hand, but we don't have poll voting, right? And we don't have special resolution. No, we only have simple majority. It means more hands saying yes than no, then we pass resolution. So when we have 5 directors here, so 3 saying yes, 2 saying no, then pass. That's all. It's only simple majority. We don't call ordinary resolution. We don't count the percentage. We just count simple majority. You understand the rules of simple majority, right? 3 out of 5 pass it. 6 out of 10 pass it. 5 saying yes, 5 saying no, out of 10, deadlock. Right? Deadlock. If there are 10 directors in a company, 5 saying yes, 5 saying no, deadlock, meaning no decision. 6 saying yes, 4 saying no, pass it. Right? That's all. But we don't call ordinary resolution, we call simple majority. Right? And no poll voting, remember, right? No poll voting. Shares will not be considered in the board of directors, right? So why you have to care about the numbers? Because, for example, right? At first, you only have 4 directors. Then the simple majority can be achieved, say, like by 3 directors. If you have a new director, but for replacement only, then the number remains the same, right? So it means that because you are still having 4 directors, then you can always pass a resolution with 3, right? 3 out of 4 will be fine, right? But if you increase number to 10, right, or to 20, then you have to think about the new magic number to pass the simple majority, right? So you have to think about when you appoint a new director, you have to think about the impact. Is it for replacement or you appoint a new director? Because when you appoint a new director, the number to achieve simple majority will be different, right? Okay, who can appoint a director? The power can be vested in the board of directors or in the general meeting. Both, right? Both. Either the board of directors or the general meeting can appoint additional director, either exclusively to one or being available to both. You get a point here. So, number one, board of directors can appoint director. Shareholders can appoint director. But somehow they're silent in the company audit. So you can change your article in order to make it available for both audits or just one audit. You get a point here. Because you have the right to do so. Because the company audit is silent on it. So you can change your article, right? You can change your article in saying that only the board director can appoint directors, or only the general meeting can appoint directors, or both organs can appoint directors. All right? That's up to you. Because the company ordinance does not describe any mandatory mechanism that we have to follow. Right? It means somehow it's silent. I'm always saying that company ordinance is silent regarding the appointment. Right? It's silent. Because the company ordinance does not describe any mandatory mechanism that you have to follow. Right? So you can change your article in a way that you feel suitable, you feel comfortable. But the dual approach actually being adopted in the model articles. Right? Dual approach means that the board of directors and the general meeting, both of them can appoint directors. That's what we call the dual approach, right? 兩個 organs 都可以appoint, right? Being adopted in what? In the model articles. You have to be very careful. this approach being adopted in the article but not in the company ordinance. So you have to pay attention to it. Why? Why you need to pay attention? Is something being adopted in the model articles? Why you have to? It can be changed, but my question is, you have to aware, right? Because the deal approach being adopted in the model articles, you have to aware of it. Why you need to aware of it? Of course, you can change, right? But why you have to be careful? Why you have to pay attention with it? If something being adopted in the model articles, so think about, try to recall the model articles. A few days before, right, last week, when we first learned about the model articles, we know that model article normally being adopted by the parties, even that is not compulsory. Even in theory, you can draft your own, but most people adopt model article, right? They just change the part, they don't want to amend in order to fit their situation, right? But most likely they adopt. When most people adopt, it means this approach will be followed by most companies, right? So you can safely assume that most companies is having a dual approach because that's being stated in the article, and most companies follow the model article. Right? I'm not saying it must be, because a model article can change. Right? You can change model article, but most companies follow. I would say over 85% of the company. If you want to know the statistics, you can read the annual report from the company registry. Right? They show the statistics. Most people follow 100% of the model article. So it means that almost 80% of the company in Hong Kong, they adopted the dual approach, right? But still, you have to be careful. But there's only an approach adopted by model article. So it's not 100% saying that all the companies, they must be, right? I'm not saying that they are absolutely adopting the dual approach. I'm only saying that it's very likely most companies is having a dual approach. Because that's not something stated in the company ordinance, but the articles only, right? And the article is being followed by most companies, right? And that's all. And also, based on the stipulation by the model articles, if a director being appointed by the board, and they can only remain in office until the next AGM, there's also something stated in the article, model article, right? So mostly that will be followed by most of the company. So it means that, right? It means that if a director being appointed by the board only, so he can only remain his directorship until the next AGM. Right? You understand what an AGM, right? And he needs to be reappointed by the general meeting for the continuation for his directorship. So if he wants to remain as a director, his appointment needs to be extended by the general meeting. All right? So that's another provision stated in the article. So that will be followed by most of the companies. But remember, not 100%. I'm not saying that it must be the case for all the companies. I'm only saying that that will be the case for most of the companies, right? So you need to have a very clear conceptual understanding, right? Don't make it wrong. So how the general meeting appoint, of course, how the board of directors appoint directors? Simple majority. Because there's only one way that the board of directors to make decisions. Remember, there's no special resolution in the board of directors. The board of directors, they make decisions only by simple majority. It's the only way, by raising their hands. Only. No shares, no poll voting, no special resolution, just simple majority, right? But how the general meeting to make decision in appointing director? Simple, according to the article, ordinary resolution, right? They pass ordinary resolution, it means 30%, or to be safe, 31%, right? The resolution can also specify the period for such an appointment, right? How long this person will be appointed under the authorization of the general meeting. But unlike the AGM, unlike the board, because based on our model articles, if a person being appointed by the board only, that person can remain as a director for 1 year only. So if he wants to extend his directorship, he needs to have approval from the members. But we don't have such a requirement for a director being appointed by general meeting. right? The general meeting can appoint a director for 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years, right? We don't have a time limit here. So it implies something. It implies that the members, they should have more control regarding directorship than the board of directors. You see that, right? Because when the director being appointed by board, that person can only remain 1 year. But if that person being appointed by general meeting, that person can remain permanently. Right? But I have to remind you once again. So all this stuff here, we are referring to the articles. Right? Model article, remember. Model article. Article 22, subsection 4 of private company. I'm referring to the model article. So it means that most companies will have a procedure like this. But I'm not saying that you can be certain that every company is doing the same. For the sake of prudency, you have to check the article, right? Because they can change. But the company ordinance, remember, does not prescribe any mandatory mechanism to follow, right? The company ordinance never exactly state a mechanism that everyone needs to adopt. You have the right to draft your own article. I'm only showing that normally, all this procedure will be followed by most of the company, but not all of the company. Right? So bear in mind, make sure that you understand. How about the qualification of directors? How about qualification? Do you remember the qualification of company secretary? Any of you remember the qualification of company secretary? No qualification requirement for company secretary. Yes, for private company. But how about listed company? Yes. So there's only qualification requirement for listed company regarding the company secretary, right? So you need to be a professional, accountant, a chartered company secretary, or a lawyer. Right? But that's only for listed company. But for private company, or even public company that's not being listed, no special qualifications as a company secretary. So they're somehow the same for directors. As a director, a natural person at age 18 or above can be appointed as a director of a company. If I remember correctly, for listed company, there's 21. But I'm referring to private company here. Yeah, that's our focus. The listed company will be another big topic. Quite different, right? Quite different. So I assume that we are dealing with a private company, limited by shares. So any natural person at age 18 or above will be eligible to be appointed. But there are some restrictions. For example, if you are bankrupt, right? If you are bankrupt, if you are still under the bankruptcy order, then you cannot be appointed as a director. Because director, you are going to learn about later. It's all about integrity. Integrity means right? Someone that can be trusted. So if you are bankrupt, it means that you are not someone who can be trusted. The thing why you are bankrupt, you see, you are not capable to settle your own debt, right? It means you are not capable to do what you promised. And that's the reason you're going bankrupt, right? Depending on you are bankrupt, yeah, I'm sorry, but that's the definition, right? You are not capable to do what you promised, right? Think about it, you borrow money from the bank, you promised to repay 5 years, but you are not capable to do so. Bank sue you and you bankrupt, right? So you're not having integrity. But as a director, you need to have integrity. So when you are not having integrity, you cannot be director. The person with unsound mind, and there's something stated in the article, in the model article, so you can change. Right? So if you don't mind to appoint a silly person, right? Someone insane to be your director, right? You want it, then you can change. But I'll give you one example. And any restriction stated in the article, well, that's something quite important because you have the right to impose restrictions in the article in any way you like. You can impose any restrictions in the article regarding the qualification to be director, and you are free to do so. Because again, the company ordinance is silent on it. Right? The company only state one condition, and that is age 18 and not to be bankrupt. Right? But other than that, you can have your own restrictions. A very common restrictions or condition stated in the article is, you may guess, shares qualification. Right? If you want to be a director of this company, you have to acquire, for example, at least 5% of shares in this company. That's very common in Hong Kong, right? At least in Hong Kong, I don't know about other jurisdictions. That's quite common. I'm not saying necessary, but quite common, right? Because you have to own this company. You have to be an owner of this company in order to be a director. Remember, you can have dual capacity, right? Always remember, dual capacity. And how about corporate directors? Can a company be a director? A company can be a shareholder, right? You already learned that in the previous lecture. And that's why we need to have corporate representative. Why we need to have corporate representative? Because a company is only a legal concept, right? It's only a box about physically. So a company must be represented by someone in order to attend the general meeting. So you already learned that. You know that shareholder can be, a company can be a shareholder of another company. A company can own shares, right? But how about director? Can a company be a director? The answer is yes. Yes. A company can also be a director, subject to some restriction. Yes, the answer is yes. Company can also be a director. We call corporate director. Corporate director. And that person will be someone must represent that company, right? So that person normally is the director of the company, right? For example, if ABC Limited is the corporate director, then the director of ABC Limited will represent the company to attend the board meeting. You get my point here, right? So a company can be a director subject to some restriction. Number one, a public company or company limited by guarantee cannot appoint a corporate director, right? Public company cannot. Company limited by guarantee cannot. A listed company cannot, right? But this company is not included in company audits because there is a requirement stated in the listing rules. But with the companies, completely different thing, right? Completely different thing. I explained to you already. This company never appeared in the company audit because this company is not something being incorporated under the company audit, right? The company is a company already here, but the stock can be traded in the stock exchange. So that's being governed by listing rules. So I can tell you that a public company cannot have corporate director. Company limited by guarantee cannot have corporate director. And a listed company cannot have corporate director. Right? Never. You can check the information on this company. You will never find any corporate director of this company. And also, one more thing. A public company, which is a member of the group of company, which a listed company is a member, also cannot appoint a corporate director. It means what? Right? It's a little bit complicated here. So I try to explain the second paragraph, right? This company cannot have corporate director. If this company being owned by a listed company, right? If this company being owned by this company, or if this company owns a listed company, then this company cannot have corporate director. All right? Last one. A private company, of course, can appoint corporate director. Right? Private company limited by shares. Private company can appoint a director. But the company audits require that at least one director shall be a natural person. So it means that if you have a board of directors and you have 10 directors here, so you only need to have one director as a natural person. The other 9 directors, they can be corporate. Right? I mean, the threshold is very low. But the law will say that you need to have one natural person at least. 即係唔可以全部唔係人。You must be a human being as one. As one must be a human being in the board of directors. But the others, you don't need to be a human, right? You're not human when saying tomorrow, right? You are not human. With the law will say that one director must be a natural person, right? There's only one. So even you have 100 directors, you just only need to have one director as a natural person, right? It's a very low threshold, very easy to fulfill. Okay, so we just learned about the appointment of directors. Of course, they are important, right? They are important. But there are different ways to appoint directors. And probably the removal of directors is also very important. So think about the control of the company, right? Think about control of the company. How to control a company? You know that because directors control company, right? So if you want to control a company, of course you have to think about your authority in appointing directors. But if you can appoint directors, it means that you can have your man in the board and they take your orders. And it means that you can control the company, right? But you also need to consider the removal of directors. Who can kick out the directors? If I can appoint directors, but the other guys can kick out my directors, I'm still not in control, right? So you have to think about control. When you think about control, you think about appointment, and you also need to think about removal. Right? Because removal is as important as appointment. So we can remove directors, of course, if it's a board director, right? Director can remove director, and the members can also remove directors. This one somehow based on the basic principle in the management of a company, because a company being managed by directors, and removal of directors is also one of the affairs of the company. And that's not being exclusively reserved for the general meeting. And the directors, they enjoy residual authority. So you can safely assume that directors, they have the right to remove directors, right? Because removal of directors is also one of the affairs of a company under the general administration of a company. So the director, they have the right to remove directors, right? Kill the other directors. And of course, the director can also decide, right? Sometimes director can resign, of course, right? You are appointed, it doesn't mean that you cannot resign. You can resign, and no one can stop you. Okay. Removed by directors, number one. The company ordinance does not mention the power of the board in removing a director, but that is not necessary. And I explained to you at the very beginning, because what? Because the directors, they enjoy residual authority. Do you remember the definition of residual authority? It means that unless something be exclusively reserved for the members, exclusively reserved, and not just reserved, but exclusively reserved. Otherwise, the directors, they have the right to do so, right? So you don't have to check the company ordinance whether the directors, they are being authorized to remove directors. But you don't have to check. You only check whether they are being prohibited to remove directors, right? If they are not being prohibited to remove directors, then they can remove directors. And this concept actually being supported with case law, right? The court also confirmed, our understanding. So even the company ordinance itself is silent, and it is logical in asserting that it has the power to remove directors. So unless something special requirements in the article that you can do so, right? Remember, when something is silent in the company ordinance, then it means that you have the right to drop your own restriction in the article. So unless something, specially stated in the article, the removal of the director just follow the normal rule of the board in having simple majority, right? So if you have 5 directors, then you have 3 directors saying removal, right? Then that director will be removed. Right? But remember one thing, you're going to learn about in coming pages, a very important concept we call fiduciary duty. You heard about it already in trust, in agency, right? and partnership, right? And also commissariat. Fiduciary duty is a very important concept in company law. Not just in common law, but especially important in company law. Fiduciary duty means a duty that you always need to think about the best interest for someone else. So as a director, you always need to take care for the best interest of the company. Best interest, right? So that is a very burdensome requirement, a very burdensome duty, right? A very heavy shoulder. You have to think about for the best interest of the company. Remember that because as a director, you own fiduciary duty to the company. So even when you pass a resolution in removing director, you still own fiduciary duty. So it means that when you try to remove a director, it must be made, such a decision must be made out of good faith, right? Out of good faith. It means that is for the goodness of the company. For example, if that director is really incompetent, right? He is having no contribution to the company, or he's an enemy of the company, he's betraying the company, then I vote to remove him, that will be perfectly fine. But if I try to kick out that director because I have some ulterior motive, I want to do something bad to that company, but that person try to stop me, and then I kick him out, so that possibly you breach fiduciary duty, and you will be sued, right? So you have to be careful. So you have the right to remove, but think about your fiduciary duty, right? One more page, then we have to write, right? Okay. You know that a director can be removed by the other directors. But something even more important, I would say, members, right? Members. Because the company ordinance is silent regarding the authority of directors to remove other directors, we just assume that they enjoy such authority. And that assumption is correct, because that's being confirmed by the court. But anyway, the company ordinance itself is silent regarding the authority of the directors in removing another director. But how about members? The situation is different, because the company ordinance expressly stated the authority of the members to remove directors. We look at the first paragraph. The members can remove a director through an ordinary resolution, right? Just 50% or 51% to be safe. Notwithstanding anything in the article or a private agreement between the company and the directors. This is very important. It means that the right of the members to remove a director by ordinary resolution cannot be changed by article or any contract. Very important, right? Very important. Because do you remember shareholders agreement? Something we learned in Lecture 4, right? And you learn about articles. When you look at the law here, the law states that notwithstanding any private agreement, so it includes shareholders agreement, and also include article. So no matter what being stated in the article or what being stated in the private agreement, when the shareholder they pass an ordinary resolution, then they can remove director, and nothing can stop them to remove the director, right? And you cannot change the article. You cannot restrict the authority of the members to remove a director. But you can amend the article to restrict the authority of the directors to remove directors. Because the company ordinance is silent. You get my point here, right? So it means that for members, they enjoy absolute authority to remove directors by passing ordinary resolution. Nothing can change their authority, right? Nothing can restrict their authority. So I can tell you that, right? Because I'm a corporate lawyer, I'm always handling corporate cases. So sometimes, I always need to entertain my client with trouble, get in trouble in the company. So they present a lot of files to me, a lot of documents, right? So I spend hours and hours to read their documents, their record of their meeting. But actually, right, I only need to read one thing. I only need to understand one thing. Are you holding more than 50%? Because when you hold more than 50% of shares, you have the right to remove director. No one can stop you, right? So you just kick out the director if you don't like, and then you solve your problem. Easy, right? So that's the magic number. So sometimes you just need to ask one question, and the problem can be resolved. But of course, right? As a bad lawyer, sometimes I pretend that I have to do a lot of work. I have to spend 20 hours to read cases, another 20 hours to read your file, and 10 hours to hold 3 meetings to advise on your case, right? But actually, I only need to do one thing because my client hold 60%, right? We hold a meeting, pass a resolution, we remove all the directors, we appoint the director if you like, and he's in complete control of the company, right? And the company, I mean, the problem being solved, right? But don't do that. Because if that's too simple, right? You cannot bill your clients, right? When you want to charge a very handsome fee, legal fees, right? Then you have to pretend that you have done a lot of work. So sometimes, you know, there's something wrong with your computer and the technician, right? 70% of cases, what they do to fix your computer, it's done. Because sometimes this computer just being uncovered. Right? You've seen some 70%, right? They do one thing, but they pretend they've done a lot. So otherwise, they cannot charge for very, you know, expensive fees in repairing, right? But that's the secret, right? Don't tell the others. And don't complain to the Bar Association, right? But anyway, remember that, right? Remember, for the first paragraph, the authority to remove directors is something stated clearly in the company ordinance. And that's very important. So that's why 50% is a very important number. It's a magic number. And also, voting is not allowed on a resolution to remove a director. What I mean by weight voting? Listen carefully because people are always making mistakes, no matter in the assignment or in the exam. For me, weight voting. Do you remember we have different class of shares, right? Different class of shares means that you can stipulate different right to different shareholders. So sometimes you can create a kind of share in saying that even you have one share, but you have 2 votes. Do you understand my point here? But normally, one share, 1 vote in a poll voting, right? But you can, you know, have a special kind of share. You say that you have 1 share, but one share, but 2 votes, or 1 share, but 10 votes. You have 1 share, but you have a casting vote. It means whenever there's a deadlock, my vote will be final, right? So you can attach such a right in your share. And that is what being adopted in some of the companies that heavily rely on the founders, like Alibaba. So Jack Ma only holds 4% of the shares of Alibaba, but he's in complete control because his share is different from the other shareholders. He has final say in the board of directors, right, and in some critical matters. So I don't have time to explain, but just remember, because some of the shares, they have special voting rights, right? It means 1 share more than 1 vote. But in terms of removal of director, no. Right? Weight voter, we call it weight voter. That will be prohibited. You cannot. We guide them to remove all directors. 1 share, 1 vote. Right? 1 share, counted as 1 vote. And that's right. Weight voting is not allowed. Even that's being stated in article. But the law says that because that's law, right? But of course, the statutory power shall not deprive the director for compensation. You have the right to remove the director. It doesn't mean that they cannot claim anything from the company. Because, do you remember that a director can have due capacity, right? Directors, they can have due capacity. It means that a person can be a director and at the same time also an employee. Just like CEO. CEO also, most of the time is also a director. So of course you can kick him out, right? But you can claim based on employment ordinance, based on employment contract. And the right here has nothing to do with his right to claim for compensation, right? The right here, it means that the company can absolutely remove the director, but it doesn't mean that the director cannot claim for compensation, right? It's entirely different matters, all right? Okay, we have a break first, right? 30 minutes.絕對可以。喺 meeting 就得，總之係 meeting。通常 EGM 唔係 EGM，通常 EGM 就傾過3樣嘢。明白。 Okay. All right. So we're back to class, right? So before the break, right? Before the break, we learned about the appointment of directors. We also learned about the removal of directors. So they are very important, right? You have to bear in mind. We also learned about the definition of a director. Because the law defines a director by anyone occupying the position, whatever the name called it. So it doesn't matter what that person being named or whether that person is working like a director. So that person will be regarded as a director, all right? So that's what we learned before the break. Okay, so now we have to learn about a very important legal concept. Very important. Yeah, I can tell you that, right? I have a gut feeling. I have a gut feeling that lecture 7 will be very important. I don't know why, right? I dreamed about it last night. Right? I dreamed about it. I dreamed about that. I said a question related to lecture 7. But I don't know whether that will be true, right? I don't know whether my dream will come true. So I dream about, I have a dream, right? I have a dream. I dream about lecture 7. Then I set a question about lecture 7. Right. So I think that lecture 7 will be very important. Okay. So that's a very important concept we have to learn. And that's what we call director duties, right? Director duties. So of course we have to learn about appointment. We have to learn about removal. But something even more important, director duties. So why we have to understand director duties? Because think about it. Directors, what they do, they control the company. And they are the managers of the company, right? Because they manage the company. So director duties is something really important, and we have to understand. So number one, what kind of duties being owned by the directors towards the company? Fiduciary duty. So I mentioned fiduciary duties so many times before. So what we mean by what we mean by fiduciary duty means you always need to think about the best interest on someone else and to a director. That person that also need to take care, or to need to think about the best interest is the company. Right? So you own a very heavy, very burdensome duty to the company. You always have to think about the best interest of the company when you make a decision. Right? And that's what we call the director duties. But exactly what is it? Director duties. So unlike the definition of a director, unlike the removal of a director by shareholders, fiduciary duty is only a common law concept. It is not from a particular section in the company ordinance. So it's not from written law, right? And it's not statutory. It's only legal principle. When the government, right, in 2014, when they introduced the new company ordinance, so before the introduction of the new company ordinance, they once considered to make fiduciary duty as a statutory concept. They try to define in the company ordinance, right? They try to define it in the company ordinance. I mean to stipulate what is it, and what must be done by a director. They try to do it, but they failed, right? And they gave up. So finally, fiduciary duty still remains a common law concept. Because that's almost impossible for someone to define fiduciary duty, or to make it statutory, or to make it written. Because that is not possible. Because you have to think about directors who manage a company day by day. There can be thousands, hundred thousands of decisions being made on every single day. It's not possible to set a very detailed guideline and say that what you should do, what you cannot do, right? So the law can only lay down a principle, and that is what still remains in the company law. And fiduciary duty is only a common law concept until nowadays, even under the new company ordinance. Right? So it's only a legal concept. So I cannot tell you exactly what is it. Right? I cannot tell you exactly what we mean by fiduciary duty. Exactly what is it? I can't tell you. But we can look for some cases. Right? Some cases decided by the court. When the court tried to define what we mean by fiduciary duty. Right? So I'm here to list out some situation that based on the previous cases, based on the judgment from the court, that ruled by the court to be violated the fiduciary duty, and individual fiduciary duty. Right? So by studying cases, we try to understand what it means of fiduciary duty. Right? Because fiduciary is something really important. The director, they own fiduciary duty to the company. But always remember, when you try to understand the different points here, remember that. Because in another case, the court held that the various obligations that being illustrated right here merely reflected the different aspects of fiduciary duty. It must be interpreted as a whole, but not separately. Right? So that's only for the sake of convenience, in order to for the convenience to understand what we mean by fiduciary duty. Because in real life, things sometimes, mix it up. It means more than one thing may be related to your case, right? Maybe involve not to make profit, secret profit, conflict of interest, everything being mixed up. So I list out with different bullet points here. So that's for convenience, right? Convenience to understand. But I'm not saying that in real life, things will happen, isolated, one by one, no, right? Because in real life, sometimes everything happens at the same time, and everything being mixed up, right? Do you get my point? Okay, so let's try to understand what it means by fiduciary duty. Very important. Number one, you have to bear in mind, when you try to understand the meaning of fiduciary duty, it means a duty only to the company, but not to individual shareholders. And that's a very important concept. Directors own fiduciary duty to the company as a whole, but not to individual shareholders, or not even to shareholders, but to the company. That's different. Remember the concept of separate legal entity. So even you own the company for 100%, right? But you are not a company. And as a director, I only own my fiduciary duty to the company, but not to the shareholders directly. Not to any shareholder, not to any individual shareholder. Alright? So that is the starting point. I'll show you a case that you can understand. So what happened in this case? Some members, they want to sell the shares to the directors. And the directors agreed to buy the share at $12 per share. Right? Okay, fine. But later on, the shareholder found that the director, they're actually negotiating with a third party. And it means later on, right, the value per share actually worth more than $12. You get my point here, right? At first, the shareholders offer the shares to the directors, and directors they were willing to buy the shares at $12 per share. But actually, the shareholders, they were negotiating with some third parties to sell the company as a whole, right? And the negotiation, as revealed in the negotiation, actually, the share value per share is much higher than $12. It's more than $20 actually. So the shareholders sue the directors for breach of fiduciary duty. Oh, come on, right? So the share per share, actually worth more than $20. So you should buy my shares with fair value, but not with undervalue. And you are directors. You owe me fiduciary duty, right? So I tried to sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, but it was held by the court as wrong. Why? Because it's a fundamental misconception regarding the meaning of fiduciary duty. Because the directors, they only own fiduciary duty to the company, but not to individual shareholders. So provided that the directors, they negotiate good price for the third party to acquire the company as a whole, then that will be fine, right? The directors, they were performing perfectly fulfilling the requirement of fiduciary duty. Because the directors, they are not owning a duty to an individual shareholder, right? I only own the fiduciary duty as a director to the company as a whole, but not to the individual owner. So this guy, the plaintiff here, made a mistake, right? A conceptual error regarding the definition, regarding the interpretation of fiduciary duty, right? Okay, so that's the starting point. But actually, what we mean by fiduciary duty, number one, the court once decided that a director must act in good faith in the interest of the company. Well, that's very abstract, right? So very abstract legal principle. You always need to, when you are making decisions, you have to act in good faith in the interest of the company. What it means. The judge defined that good faith means what he believed to be one of the best interests of the company. It is a subjective test on the mind of the director. The court will not interfere, except where it believes that the director has not acted honestly. Well, you have to understand a legal concept and what we call subjective test, right? Because in law, when you try to understand something, right? When you try to understand a behavior, so sometimes we try to understand by objective test. So sometimes we try to understand by subjective test. And what is the difference between the two? Objective test, it means we are not considering what's inside the mind of that person. I don't care, right? I don't care why you made a decision like this. I only care about the consequence, right? If you have done something, if you did something, where the consequences are being so bad, being so disastrous, then you made a wrong decision. And you are not having good faith to the company. Because I only care about the consequence, right? For example, if the company made a decision to invest for a piece of land in Africa, right? But there was a civil war there. So the company lose all the money. The company lose a substantial sum of money. So if we adopt the objective test, then the director breached fiduciary duty, right? Because we don't care what's inside the mind of that director. We only care about what actually happened and the consequence, right? That's the objective test. Do you understand? And what's subjective test? Subjective test, it means that the judge not really concerned the consequence or not actually happened. Provided that if the judge believed the director made a decision with honesty, right? It means if the judge believes that the director made decisions honestly for the good faith of the company, with the good faith of the company, then that will be fine. And the consequence will be ignored. Do you get my point? It means that even the consequence, finally, the company is losing money, right? The investment in Africa for a piece of land, it turned out to be disastrous. The company lose billions of dollars. But provided that if the court still believes that decision being made honestly, right? That person, that director, still be fine, okay, and not to be regarded as breaching the fiduciary duty. And that's what we call subjective test, right? So, what mean by good faith? The court adopted subjective test, right? Very important. So that said, the court had no intention to supervise decision made honestly. The court is not in a position to reveal the merits of a business decision. Very important, right? So normally you cannot sue a director. Normally, right? I'll tell you some exceptions, but normally you cannot sue a director for breach of fiduciary duty because his decision finally turned out to be unpleasant, finally turned out to be losing money, or finally turned out to be disastrous. You cannot, right? Unless you can prove that when he made that decision, he was not made that decision out of honesty, not out of good faith. You get my point here. It's a very subtle difference, right? Why? Because you have to think about the court is not in a position to review the merits of the business decision. The judge is not. The judge is not a businessman. The judge is only a judge, and the judge. The judges, they only understand the law, right? They don't understand business. It's not possible to ask the court to review the decision, whether the decision being good or not, whether it's a good business decision or bad, business decision. Because we have different kinds of companies. We have public company, we have computer, we have manufacturer, we have retail, we have wholesaler, we have trading, right? We have biotechnology, all kind of business. So how can the judge make a decision on whether that decision is good or not? All right? So that's not the duty for the court to care about whether it's good or not on the business science. You talk to the professor in the business school, right? When you study in an MBA class, you can discuss with your professor. But that's not the job of the judge. So the judge only care about one thing. When you made that decision, why you made that decision? When you made that decision, because you truly believe that it's for the goodness of the company, and that will be fine. So even the consequence will be something unwelcome, right? Something bad. Still be fine, right? We look at judgment here. Very good. I hope you understand. I know this is quite difficult, but I hope that you can understand. We look at judgment from the court. The court held that the question is not whether will be objectively by the court. That particular act under challenge was in fact in the interest of the company. Rather, the question is whether the director honestly believed that his act was in the interest of the company. The issue is as to the director's state of mind. Right? The real question is as to the state of mind of the director, not the final consequence. Of course, no doubt, right? The court further elaborated that. It's clear that the act under challenge results in substantial detriment in its back to the company. The director will have a harder task assuring the court that he honestly believed to be for the company's best interest, but that does not detract from the subjective nature of the test. So it means that when you make a very poor decision, it costs the company to lose a lot of money, and that will be quite difficult for the director to persuade the court that I made that decision honestly, right? That will be difficult, but that does not detract from the subjective nature of the test. But the court still concerned what is in the mind of that director, because the court will not punish the director because he made a poor decision, right? Even a director made a poor decision, it doesn't mean that he breached fiduciary duty, because that's not possible for a director to make sure that all the decisions he made will turn out to be profitable, right? So otherwise, no company will be losing money. We have company losing money. We have company being run up. We have company, we have losing business, we have failing business. Why? Because, well, no one's perfect, right? No one's perfect. So sometimes you fail. It doesn't mean that you made a mistake. Sometimes you fail. It doesn't mean that you are not making the decisions out of honesty, just because you are bad luck or what, right? So the court only concerned why you made that decision. If the court believes that you honestly made it, even it turned out to be bad, you will be fine, and you will not be sued for breach of by this review, right? So you try to understand the judgment here, very good, right? So very good judgment. You try to, when you back home, you take a look again, right? But especially when you are not capable to sleep, right? 辛苦嘅時候，你睇下條 right? It's very helpful. Right? It put you in sleep within 20 seconds. But anyway, I mean, the court elaborated the principle very well, right? You try to truly understand the judgment here. I show you a case, then probably you can understand what is the main concern of the court. It's a very interesting case here. Akai Holding, right? It's a very famous case. So what happened in this case? So what happened here? The director of Akai, right? The company is being named as Akai, caused the company to obtain a loan from a bank to repay the liabilities of another company, Segment. So Akai is here. So Akai Limited, right? And Segment Limited. So this company obtain a loan from a bank to pay the liabilities of Segment, right? It means this company helped another company to pay a loan. All right. Akai did not have any interest in Segment, right? No interest. It means something like a charity. Because, Akai is not going to benefit from anything by helping Segment to settle the loan. But anyway, Akai helped the Segment to settle the loan. Okay. Why something so silly happened? Because both companies, they are having a common holding company. So STC Limited, right? It doesn't care. It doesn't matter with the name, right? It's a company. The two companies have a common holding company called STC Limited. And the directors of Akai was also a director of STC Limited. It is the director here. The director of Akai is also a director of this company. How do you think? By looking at this diagram, how do you feel? Now, do you understand why Akai is willing to settle the loan of Segment? Can you understand the logic behind? Because this company, right? This guy is director of this company, but this guy is also a director of this company, and this company owns Segment. So by doing this, it will be helpful for this company, and also will be helpful to the director here. Because the director is a director of this company, also this company. It means that he also related to this company, right? So the director here, apart from being a director here, also looking at the chain, he also related to this company. So it's explained the reason behind why the director here procured the company to help this company, right? Do you understand? Okay. Anything wrong? The first rule regarding fiduciary duty, you have to make the decisions of good faith, right? The director procured the Akai in shouldering the burden of Segment. Company that Akai had no interest, right? This company had no interest in Segment. So it failed to persuade the court that the decision was for the betterment of the Akai, but indeed very likely to be for its own interest at the expense of Akai. The problem is not the decision itself being bad for the company, but the whole scenario suggests that the decision was not honestly made. And that's the key point here. The director here being sued by the company, by this company, right? Remember separate legal entities. Director being sued by Akai for breach of fiduciary duty. The court ruled that. Why? Not because this decision is silly, right? It sounds silly, I know, but that's not the main reason. Because the court didn't care, right? Do you remember whether that's a good or sensible business decision is not the concern of the court. right? They don't care. But the court care one thing. When you make that decision, what is in your mind? Right? What is in your mind when you make that decision? And then the court look at the whole picture here. The court believes that when the director made decision on behalf of Akai to procure Akai to have Skinner, it was for his own interest, but not for the interest of Akai. So the director was being sued for breach of fiduciary duty, and the court ruled that he was in breach of fiduciary duty, not because of his silly behavior, right? Not because of Akai helping a company without having any interest. No, that's not the main concern. But the picture behind was in the mind of the director, right? Think about it. Why the director here, why he did something like this? Because that's for his own interest. So you look at the whole picture here, right? So I hope you understand that. And always remember, the subjective mind of the director will be the main concern of the judge, but not whether the decision here, right, to help another company settle loan, whether it is a bad or good decision. No, but the reason behind. And the reason behind is by looking at the whole picture. All right? Number 2, to exercise power for a proper purpose. What I mean by exercise power for a proper purpose? The court held that, so except for the requirement that the director must always exercise authority for the best interest of the company, but that authority, when you exercise your authority, that must be for a proper purpose. What I mean by proper purpose? What I mean by proper purpose? We look at that paragraph. Even a director has been given a specific authority to do something, it does not mean that he can do it for whatever reason, as own wish. So it means that sometimes you are being authorized to do something, right? So you have the authority to do it. But it doesn't mean that you can do it in whatever reason you like. You must have a proper reason, or you must have a proper purpose, right? When you want to do something, first, number 1, you have to think that, you have to consider whether you have the authority to do so. For example, right? For example, can I recommend a textbook to you guys? Can I recommend a textbook? Yes, right? So I have the authority to do so. Why? Because I'm your lecturer. So I'm your teacher. So I have the authority. But Simon, do you have the authority to recommend a textbook to all the classmates here? No. No, that's ultra wise. No, of course you are a student. I'm sorry. But because we have a student status. As a teacher, I can recommend a textbook to everyone, of course, right? I have the authority to do so. But you don't. Right? You don't. Because you're only students. Right? You're supposed to learn. You are not supposed to recommend a textbook. Right? Just supposed, I suppose. Right? So when you don't have the authority to do so, then forget it. Right? Right? Because you cannot do it at all. Okay. So I have the right to recommend a textbook. Everyone here, right? I have the right to do so. But think about it. If I recommend a textbook to you, and that textbook is actually not suitable for this module, actually not suitable for this program, but that textbook, because I'm the author of that textbook, and I earn royalties, right? I mean, I can share the commissions. I can share from the sales. So I recommend that textbook to you, even I know that that textbook is not useful in this program, in this module. And do you think that I'm doing the right thing? And you get the point here. You have the right to do something. It doesn't mean that you can do it in whatever way you like, or in doing it without any reason. You have the right to do something, but you have to do it with a proper reason. So I have the right to recommend a textbook to you, all you guys, if that textbook is really suitable or really helpful when you're studying in these modules, when you're studying in this program, right? Then that is a proper purpose, absolutely. But if I recommend a textbook to you guys because I want to, because I care about the royalties, right? Because I care about sharing the commission from the publisher, then I am doing it without a proper purpose. And do you get my point here? And that is what same. That will be the same for a director, right? That will be the same for a director. It means that even director, they are being authorized to do a lot of things on behalf of the company. But sometimes you have to think about that they are doing something, whether they are doing something under a proper purpose. I'll show you a case here. So, some directors, they issue substantial sum of shares to a new shareholder at a price which is unreasonably low by comparing with the company market value. Right. So the director issues shares to a new shareholder, right? To a new investor. Well, nowadays you know that, right? Companies is free to set the share price. Even in the old days, provided that you are not lower than the power. The director keep issuing shares to a new investor at a price which is much lower than actually what it worth, right? Anything wrong here? You have to think about that. What is the purpose in issuing shares? You learned that already in the due selection. Yes, to raise fund, right? When you issue shares, the primary purpose of a company issuing shares to raise fund, because the money paid to become an asset of the company, right? So you issue shares, and you have the right to set the share price, and your purpose is to raise fund. How you set the price? You should set the price as high as you can, right? Is it sensible? Absolutely. Because that's the only way that you can raise more funds for the company. But what happened here? The shareholders set the share price as low as he can, right? What is he doing? Do you think the director, they have right to issue shares? Yes, absolutely, right? So they are doing something within their authorizations. But do you think that the directors doing something under a proper purpose? No. Because the primary purpose in issuing shares is to raise funds. If you want to raise funds, you should issue shares, at least at fair value, right? Or you should issue shares as high as you can. Because that's the only way that you are doing something good for the company. So if you are issuing shares with the price as low as you can, that's what you're doing. The court held that the allotment, right, it means issuing shares, was not having any commercial justification, but to replace the existing major shareholder by diluting the shareholding. So it was held by the court as improper purpose. Diluting, it means keep issuing shares to make your shareholding in terms of percentage lower. You get the point here, right? You have two shareholders, you own 50, you own 50, but I keep issuing shares to you. So after several rounds, you are having more than 50%, and then you can control the company and then you can kick out Simon, right? So when I keep issuing shares to Angela, with a very low price, it means that I'm exercising my right without a proper purpose, because I'm not helping the company raise funds, but I'm helping a new investor to take control of this company. And that's not the proper purpose, right? It's not the proper purpose by considering in terms of the interest of the company. So I hope that you get my point. So when you think about the fiduciary duty of the director, you have to think about it from the perspective of a proper purpose. You have to do it. You have the right to do so, right? I have the right to recommend a textbook. But I recommend a textbook based on you guys' interests. If that textbook is helpful to you guys, of course I can do it, right? So I recommend a textbook to you guys because I want to earn the royalties, right? That is not proper purpose. And I impeach on my fiduciary duty, all right? Conflict of interest. I don't think that's very difficult to understand. Just by using common sense, or if you're already in the commercial world, right? If you're working in, anything commercial, then I suppose that you understand what I mean by conflict of interest. What I mean by conflict of interest? We have something we call, how do you define it? It means that you should avoid anything that you can place yourself in a position where there will be conflict interest between you and the company, right? So not to put yourself into a position that you make conflict with your own company as a director. That's something we call no conflict rule, and a very typical example is when the directors enter into a transaction with the company, right? Think about it. As a seller, what is your primary motive as a seller? When you try to sell something, you care about your own interest. You want to make profit. So you want to sell something as high as you can, right? And as a buyer, what will be your primary concern? Except for the quality, right? If the quality remain the same, you want to pay as less as you can. And that's for your own interest. And then you think about if you are director of a company, means you are in control of the company. You represent a company. But you are trying to sell something from yourself to the company. Then you are in a position of conflict interest. Because that is something you cannot compromise. That's not possible to compromise. Right? There must be conflict. But when you are acting for your own best interest, that will harm the company. If you are acting for the best interest of the company, then you harm yourself, right? So either way will be, undesirable. So you should avoid that, right? And that's what we call conflict interest. I think that's not really difficult to understand, right? But there's something really important in a listed company. I don't know if you study further to the advanced diploma, when you learn about corporate governance, or when you learn about listing rules, you know something we call the connected transaction. Right? Connect transaction, 關聯交易. It means that there are listing rules to prohibit the directors or the management or the major shareholders to sell their own property to the company or to buy the asset from the company. Because they always like to do it. What they want to do, they want to sell the rubbish to the company at a very expensive price in order to extract all the cash out, right? And sometimes they try to buy something really expensive from the listed company with a very low price and then make it their own, right? So that will be prohibited under listing rule with something we call a connected transaction. Right? But anyway, remember that, right? When you think about fiduciary duty, you have to think about conflict of interest. Director must avoid the transaction where there's a personal interest in conflict or potentially in conflict. Even with just with potential, you still have to avoid it. You cannot just wait for it to happen. But if you predict that if that may happen, then you should avoid it. Just like a lawyer, right? Just like a lawyer. If I'm already representing Philips here, right? Philips is my client already, so I'm acting for Philips. So a new client tried to approach me, and this Angela, right? So Angela tried to sue Philips, right? Because you don't know that it's already my client. I know that there may be conflict of interest. Because when I'm trying to help Philips, so I will hurt Angela. I try to help Angela, I'm going to hurt Philips. And that's something I cannot compromise, right? So if Philips is already my client, I should turn down her request for my service, right? I have to avoid that at all. I cannot, take your instruction and then wait until something in conflict to happen and only try to stop at that moment. No, I should stop that, right? I should avoid that thing to happen at the very beginning because I can predict that if I'm already retained by Philips, if I still try to help Angela, there must be conflict of interest. Sooner or later, just a matter of time, right? So I should avoid that at all. And that's your duty, right? And remember, the duty to avoid conflict of interest can be breached, even if the transaction is in fact fair to the company. So you have to be careful. Because that is a very burdensome duty on the director, right? It means that when you try to sell something to the company, so even the price may be fair, right? You are only selling at a merit price, but you still need to avoid that, right? because you have a very heavy burden, right? Another one, we call the no-profit rule. Well, there's something very similar to the conflict of interest, but not exactly the same way. What I mean by no-profit rule? It means that the director are not allowed to use their position to gain personal advantage. What it means, you should not obtain any benefit or gain by reason of or through that position as a director, or by reason of some opportunity or knowledge resulting from that position as a director. So exactly what it means. Think about it. Because you are a director, right? You are a director. For example, if you are a director of a pharmaceutical company, so you know what is the main business of a pharmaceutical company? They make drugs, right? They make medication. And because you are a director, right? You are a director. So you learn about a new formula in curing cancer. Right? You know the cancer drugs are extremely expensive. Right? Sometimes, I mean, that's a very sad situation. I mean, the patient, they spend millions of dollars to buy the drugs, right? Just to stay alive for a few more years, right? So I always try about stories, very sad stories. But you know the drugs are very expensive because the drugs are under the patent, right? And they are patent, they can charge, any price they like. So if you are directors of a company, a pharmaceutical company, because you are in control of the company, so you can learn about the formula, right? You can learn about a new formula. So you learn about a formula, you know that it has great market potential. It means you can make a lot of money from the market. So you quit, right? You just learn about it and then you quit. If you set up a new company to use that formula to make a drug first, then you are in breach of fiduciary duty because you are in breach of the no-profit rule. Because you should not take advantage of your position as a director at the expense of your company, right? Why? Because you are competing with your company. We are calling that corporate opportunity or business opportunity, right? Because that business opportunity belongs to your original company. And you try to take advantage of it, and then you resign, and then you sell your company. And make it your own business, right? So that will be in breach of the no-profit rule. Or sometimes, when you learn about, quotation is something really sensitive. It's a very confidential information for some of the companies, right? Quotation. Quotation sometimes is secret, right? Sometimes, because when you know the quotation of another company, then you can make your quotation slightly lower, and you can get the business. You get my point here, right? You know the potential buyer trying to buy something, right? Something identical to the different seller. So the buyer want to know, which one is offering the lowest price. So if you know the quotation of the other company, you just make it slightly lower, and you can get the contract, right? You get the business. So maybe quotation is something, it's very useful information. Because you are a director, so you learn about all the quotation of this company, but you set up your own company, right? And then to steal the business of your original company, then you also in breach of the no-profit rule, right? Because you are taking advantage from your position as a director, right? Something we call corporate opportunity, business opportunity. Because you stole the opportunity of this company, right? You're stealing from it. So you can take a look at this case. Convoy, right? Convoy. 不當轉移商機。The company launched the second wave of legal actions against two former executives. Stealing the business, right? Stealing the business. This guy, right? This guy. He was a former director of Convoy. Because he learned about all the confidential information of this company. So he tried to set up a new company, right? Based on the information he obtained from his old company. So he stole the client from his former company and then being sued by the former company as a breach of fiduciary duty, right? Under the no-profit rule, business opportunity, corporate opportunity. You can take a look, if you like, you can search in Google, right, for his case. It's not a very old case, right? Just 3 years before. You can take a look. to understand what we mean by 不當轉移商機係。Right? Stealing the business. Right? Stealing the business. Okay, so that's all about fiduciary duty, right? That's all about fiduciary duty. So, fiduciary duty is always about something you should do or you should not do. Because you should never do anything that you may breach your fiduciary duty only to the company, right? So, and fiduciary duty has nothing to do with the merits of your decisions, right? Merits. Fiduciary duty has nothing to do with the merits of the decision. It means that if your decision finding the child to be problematic or child to be losing a lot of money, it has nothing to do when the court is considering whether you breach your fiduciary duty, right? Because the court concerned what? Something you already learned, the subjective mind. Whether that decision being honestly made. If that decision being honestly made, that will be fine, right? You are not in breach of fiduciary duty. But apart from fiduciary duty, we have another concept, which is not a common law concept, but something stated in the company ordinance, right? It is statutory. And there's something we call a statutory duty of care and skill and diligence. What it means. So it means that, so apart from, you always need to bear in mind, not to breach of fiduciary duty, but directors also under duty to exercise reasonable care, skill, and intelligence when you're performing duties. It means that the level of your competence, right? So you have to make sure that when you are doing something, you have to do it with a reasonable skills. So otherwise, you will be liable to the company, but not fiduciary duty, right? Don't mix up, not fiduciary duty, but something under the law, under the company ordinance, section 465, subsection 2, right? Which is a statutory requirement regarding your competence, legal liability, right? But not fiduciary duty. Okay, what is it? So what will be the level of competence regarding a director? The company ordinance stated two things here. Number one, the general knowledge, skills, experience that may reasonably be expected of a person carrying out the function as director, and, right? You mean both, and. The general knowledge, skill, and experience that a director has. Okay. You know, so that's the law, right? But what it means, right? What it means. Number one, it set out the general standard in assuming duty as a director. It refers to the standard expected in performing function as a director in general, and the standard will related to the nature and the type of each particular company. So it will be something like this. So this is the level of competence. Right? It means how good you can do something, right? How good you can do something. So the requirement will be something like this, right? That will be what being expected for ABC Limited. Because ABC Limited is a small company. The turnover just for $1 million, right? Annual turnover just $1 million. And with 3 directors, 5 shareholders, right? And selling noodles, small company, right? So that will be what being expected. But if you are a director in HSBC, then the level of competence will be here. Because the first requirement is by considering the nature and the type of each particular company. So the size of the company, right? The turnover of the company, and the level of complexity of your business will be considered. So if you are director of HSBC, you will be expected to what? Perform better. But if you're only director of ABC Limited, low, right? So the law concerns about the level of competence, and you have to attain a reasonable level. So if this is the reasonable level, then you have to be above the reasonable level. But this line, this red line, will be different. It depends on the nature of your company, right? For ABC Limited, the red line is here. But for HSBC, the red line is here. It means this guy just slightly above the red line, all right? Sorry, that's the level of competence. But apart from that, we have another standard, and that is the director himself, right? Okay, I mean in general, the red line is here. So if you perform your duty here, you will be fine. But the court will also consider your own special knowledge, skills, experience. For example, if you have professional qualification, if you are also a CPA, then when you make decisions related to financial matters, or when you are an engineer, then when you make decisions, when you work in a manufacturing company, that line will again be raised because of your own personal qualification, right? It means generally the line is here, but because you are a CPA, then the line raised up. If you are holding a PhD, right, raise it. If you are a lawyer, raise it further. So both the nature of the company and your own qualification will be considered to determine the decision of this red line. And you have to always make sure that you are above the red line, right? Of course, that's only the guiding principle, because I mean we cannot quantify, right? We cannot actually write, draw a diagram here. It's not possible, right? That's only the logic. I try to show you the logic. So how to make decisions regarding the competence as a director, and you just have to make sure that you are always above the red line, right? And that red line will be not always stable, right? Will move. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. Depends on nature of company and depends on your own qualification. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it gets lower, right? But anyway, the due standard must be both fulfilled. So standard A is the baseline, the nature of the company, but that line may be raised for your own attributes, right? Your own qualification, right? So always bear in mind. Okay, so a few more pages before we end the class. So we discussed a lot regarding official fiduciary duty, right? So you should avoid that, you should be careful. But can you resolve that problem with some shortcut? The answer is yes, right? What you can do, simple, ratification or authorization. What I mean by ratification or authorization, it means your bad behavior actually being learned by the shareholders and also being approved. And normally that will be fine, right? So it means that you can authorize something in advance before you do the bad things, right? It means, I mean, it sounds very ridiculous. You are telling the shareholders, I'm going to do something bad, right? But the shareholders approve that authorize you to do something bad, then you will be fine. Or you have done something bad, but you get the ratification of the shareholders, right? You already done something bad, you did something bad, but the members, they are okay with it, right? They're fine with it. So the key point here is the disclosure. You have to make frank and full disclosure. It's a legal term, a legal jargon, right? Frank and full. Frank, F-I-N-K. F-I-N-K. It means honesty, something like honesty, right? Frank, right? Frank. And full means the whole picture, right? Frank and full disclosure. So if you disclose everything, if that being approved in advance or being ratified subsequently, you'll be fine. You will not be suited for breach of fiduciary duty, right? So even you are a bad guy, right? You may have done something bad, right? 男人越壞先越愛我。So it doesn't matter, provided that your wife forgives, right? So it doesn't matter. Your girlfriend forgives. When you get ratifications or authorization, you will be fine. How to get the ratification or authorization? Simple, ordinary resolution. It's not really high threshold, right? On ordinary resolution, it means 50% or 51% for sake. So once you get authorization, you will be fine. You will not be sued for breach of fiduciary duty. But that's only one restriction. The interested directors and associated persons cannot vote when ratification is being sought, right? Because remember, director can also be one of the members. So you cannot approve yourself, right? This is common sense. Or associated person means person related to you. For example, your wife. If your wife is also a shareholder, or your daughter is also one of the shareholders, right? When someone associated with you, that person cannot vote, and you cannot vote because you cannot approve yourself in doing anything bad. The last thing, is it possible, right? We discussed a lot related to breach of fiduciary duty, but you may want to ask a question, can I amend the articles in order to exempt the director from doing bad things, right? Amend the article in saying that even a director in breach of fiduciary duty, the company cannot sue. Can you amend an article in a way like this? The answer is no, you cannot. Why? Because the company law states that. It's by section 468, subsection 1 and 2. It states that any provision in the articles intended to exempt a director from liability under the company is void, right? It means that you cannot change the article in a way that you will always allow the director to do bad things, right? But don't mix up with ordinary resolution. Ordinary resolution is case by case, right? Do you remember? Do you understand the difference here? Ordinary resolution, to ratify something is case by case. You have to present your case to the general meeting for approval, every single time. But I'm saying that you cannot change the article, then you grant a general exemption to the directors. It means directors in this company can always do bad things and cannot be sued by the company, right? No, you cannot amend the article. Something like this, all right? Get the law say that. Also, the law also says that you cannot change the article in a way that you indemnify a director against liability only to the company, right? You cannot change the article in saying that even the company being sued by even the director being sued by the company for breach of fiduciary duty, but the director can still ask the company to indemnify its losses, right? That is also not allowed. You get the point here, right? You cannot change the article in saying that, okay, when you have done something bad, and then the company sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, right? And you need to pay compensation to the company. But in turn, you can ask the company to pay you back. No, right? No, you cannot do something like this. But there's one thing you can do. You can indemnify a director against liability under to third party. So because you are a director, right, and you represent the company, so sometimes you may incur liability when you are dealing with the third party. I'm talking about third party. So it has nothing to do with fiduciary duty. Because fiduciary duty is own the company. There's always an internal matter. But if you are a director, and when you are dealing with the third party, and you are being sued, right, for some reason you are being sued by the third party, then you can ask the company to indemnify you. Right? It means when you are being sued, you have to pay $1 million to compensate Mr. Lee, right, as a third party. Then you can ask the company to pay you back, and that is allowed, right? That is fine. That's okay. But you cannot compensate a director for breach of fiduciary duty, right? Because it doesn't make sense at all, right? Because on the one hand you sue him, and on the other hand you pay him back, right? It doesn't make sense. Now, of course, you cannot cover criminal offense, right? You cannot cover criminal offense. Say if you are being sued by the ICAC, if you are being arrested by the police, you cannot claim the legal fees from your own company, right? No, that's not allowed. Criminal behavior will not be included in section 470, right? Okay, the last 2 pages before we end the class. Just a simple concept that I want you to know, right? A simple concept. A simple concept related to board meeting. So always remember that directors manage a company. So unless we have one director, otherwise, the board of directors make decisions based on, simple majority, right? Based on decision collectively, not just one person, right? Not just one person. So always bear in mind first, right? Then I explain to you a very important legal principle here. A company, unless you have only one director, if you have one director, you don't have to concern about the board of directors because we don't have a board at all, right? Just one director. Just like the case in your assignment, there's only one director. Okay, so if you have a board, then the board make decision based on simple majority. It means collectively, right? Okay. So individual director is not entitled to exercise their authority. Not individual director, remember, right? Even you are one of the directors, but you are not representing the board at all. The board make decision collectively, not just by you, right? Okay. Because the decision of the board can be regarded as the mind of the company. So it means that's very important, right? When I want to sign a contract with a company, and I know that there are 10 directors here, or 40 directors, right? All you guys are directors. Remember, we don't have a maximum number of directors, right? So all you guys are directors. But I only deal with this company through Angela, right? So she's the director, she's one of the directors. But I only deal with this company, right? I'm negotiating of a contract with this company, just through Angela, right? I want you to ask a question. So there are so many directors here. And you have your own articles, right? If Angela told me that you are being properly authorized by the board to sign this contract on behalf of your company, how can I make sure that she was actually being authorized to sign a contract? You get my point here? If there are 40 directors, when you hold your board of directors, right? When you hold your board meeting, I'm not, one of it, right? I cannot observe your meeting, right? I'm not one of the members to attend your board meeting. And I don't understand your articles. I don't know what the rules in your company. I don't know whether this kind of contract can be signed by your company, can be signed by Angela. I don't know, right? Okay. So if I signed a contract with Angela, one of the directors, but finally it turned out to be, right, that contract actually violated something in the articles. Or actually that contract not being properly approved by the board of directors. Do you think that contract still valid? So don't mix up with ultra wires, right? Don't mix up with ultra wires. Ultra wires related to object course only. I'm asking you a question. I signed a contract with Angela. Angela told me that you represent a company, right? But in fact, something wrong. For example, that contract violated some articles of this company, right? Not object course, right? Just something in the article. Or actually, that contract not being properly approved by the board here, right? So all you guys are right. Do you think that contract is still valid? Yes or no? You think that contract is still valid? How do you think, Simon? You think that contract is not valid? How about you guys? Do you think that contract is still valid? Because that's very important, right? Think about that.
It depends.
Yes, it depends, right? Yes. No. Angela is the director here, right? And she told me that she represents the company. She told me that that contract probably approved it, everything fine. But it turned out to be wrong, right? And then I asked you a question, whether that contract is still valid. But your answer is perfect, right? But it depends, right? It depends. It depends on what?
The notice.
Right, you can say so.
Actual notice for
Yes. Right. I can tell you that, right? I can tell you that. Unless you have actual notice, right? It means you are actually notified by the company before you sign the contract, right? Otherwise, you can assume that everything is fine in this company, even actually something wrong. But the contract is still valid, and we call it the Turpin rule, right? Or indoor management rule. What is it? The rule states that the third party can assume that the internal affairs and regulations have been properly performed by the company. As simple as that, right? And this is a guiding principle. It means that unless you have actual notice, remember actual notice, right? Because we have different kind of notice. Actual notice, it means you are actually being notified. Someone send you an email, someone send you a letter, someone make you a phone call and telling you that you please don't sign a contract, right? Should never been authorized to sign a contract. That's actual notice. Or someone notify you by email and saying that don't sign a contract over $1 million you enter, right? And that's actual notice. So if you have actual notice, then you cannot rely on the Turpin rule. You cannot rely on indoor management rule. It means that the contract is not valid, right? Because you have been notified. But unless you have actual notice, otherwise you can rely on Turpin rule, right? So why we call it Turpin rule? Because this is a case from Royal British Bank versus Turpin, right? So what happened in this case? Very simple, right? But anyway, I explain to you. The board of directors approved the loan borrowed from the bank, right? But in fact, it violated some provision in the article because, right, that transaction must actually be approved by the members. But that's not something known by the bank, right? It means the bank didn't know it, right? The bank didn't know that. There's an article in saying that the loan must be approved by members. The bank assumed that the loan will be fine if they're being approved by the board, right? But the court ruled that the bank could assume the internal regulation of the company had been duly followed and was entitled to enforce the loan against the company because the internal affairs of the company can be ignored by the external party. The external party can assume that everything fine inside the company unless you have actual notice, right? Why I have to emphasize actual notice? Because we have other kind of notice, except for actual notice. We have three different kinds of notice in law. Number one, of course, actual notice, right? Actual notice, it means an email, a phone call, a letter, right? You are actually being notified something. Another one we call constructive, right? Constructive notice, it means that something being held public, and you're supposed to know. For example, right? For example, whether Li Ka-shing, whether Victor Li Ka-shing is a chairman or director of Chang'an. So you can search in the company website, and you can search in the stock exchange. So that will be constructive notice. It means I suppose you understand, right? Constructive notice. But constructive notice is not applicable in the situation here, right? So only actual notice. We have another kind of notice we call deemed notice, right? Deemed notice. What I mean by deemed notice, it means I suppose you understand if you are that particular kind of person. For example, right? For example, if you have a law degree, then I can assume that you understand there are five different kinds of company, right? And you have deemed notice means I suppose you know that, right? Because of your own background, right? Because of your profession, because of your education, right? So that's what we call the deemed notice. I'm deemed that, right? 即係當你知道 right? 當你知道 right? That's what we call the deemed notice. So we have different kinds of notice here, right? Actual notice, constructive notice, deemed notice. Regarding the Turpin case, right, or regarding the internal management, so only actual notice will defeat the indoor management rule, right? If you're actually being notified, then you cannot rely on the indoor management. You cannot rely on Turpin rules, all right? Okay, so that's all for today, right? So let's talk about the assignment on common certificate, right?
翻嚟嘅時候，一啲嘢係收費嘅，咁個人計計佢先。
forum 計，即係都計佢嘅 forum 計，但佢唔可以就我成日都會呢個嘢我知道，我覺得係呢個違反咗嘅，其實即係都純粹就係違反咗唔一定係即係如果唔會去即係專門學校嘅，同一間咧就絕對唔係專門關事嘅，絕對佢另外其他違反嘅嘢，純粹違反。唔係你違反同一時間可能你譬如話你你要簽一份500萬合約，咁你就要攞到shareholder 嘅 order of approval 咁樣，咁本身就唔係。咁但係同一時間你想bypass呢個 rule，咁你就做啲其他嘅 record 出嚟，咁你咪犯晒兩個咯，即係同一時間你又做假文件，又做假文件，同一時間你又啲查假圖，即係你可能犯晒兩樣，但係本身 article 就係唔嘅。即係唔係刑事嚟，唔可以報警拉嘅。除非真係明顯佢犯咗其他啦。即係你，但係你可能省時間犯唔到嘅，你有可能犯。咁如果喺嗰個 report 嗰個大家AG 啊嘛，即係 AG 都可以公佈啊嘛。如果唔係頭先話講，但係嗱理論上咧，你 AGM 有3個 resolution，但係攞住嘅咧一定要加啲嘢。但係你可唔可以加一啲變異嘅嘢？理論上可以。但係一般人唔會咁做。一般人如果真係譬如佢因為方便，我只開會，我不如讓喺呢啲人過埋，反正係點啊？佢哋就會用咩做法咧？就會話我見呢條即係我時間均衡嘅意思。哦，佢可以咁講㗎嘛？即係我呢啲嘅聲就係 follow 佢嘅啲時間，而呢條我提咗之後就即刻開呢啲，佢通常會咁做，就唔會將佢撈咗呢啲人。但係你話撈埋呢啲係得係就係得嘅，但係一般嘅 practice 啲人。呢個 rate 作 share 唔計嘅話咧，咪變咗某啲 share 批嘅人嚟好多咯。即係譬如話，如果我 public share 嘅，可能啲想嚟到我唔可以參與嗰啲嘅 share。係啊係啊，可能你乜變咗我咪冇得參與。係啊，有啲嘢你可能我可以有機會同埋有機會嘅。即係有啲嘢呢個就係我點解佢又唔 share？有啲人佢只想你分佢間公司，佢唔想你知。係喎。所以佢寫明你除咗可能我 dividend policy 之後，你咩都唔可以。佢可以咁寫，即係包括連炒呢個大家都唔可以，佢可以嘅，佢可以嘅。
呢個講嘅其實係英文問題。呢個 before the AGM 咧，如果擺最後呢度，個意思都係一樣。
你想問乜事？你唔好問我個人，你想問，即係你唔明乜嘢我覺得。
即係如果呢度問你before the AGM，咁其實同你嗰個擺法係一樣。
我唔明你諗啊，總之就係話你要嚇，你將呢啲嘢準備好，你準備好晒，呢個就係我意思。咁到時嘅開會時就俾嗰啲 sales。點解要我用電波嘅時就係我話呢啲嘢係開會之前佢哋應該已經收到嘅，佢哋去到個會時要 approve 佢，即係佢唔係去到個會先提呢啲嘢，所以我就用電波。我嘅意思係咁。
同埋呢度咧，即係如果 DR 之後。即係 IRD 會主動問個 social partner 報稅定係叫個 social partner 主動呢啲？
佢會 send 到即係等於你如果有開文，你有咗個 record 之後，太少會唔係交報稅嗰個啦。應該係我冇我理解埋。
同埋我有個方法嘅嘢想問，即係關於。即係如果個律師佢挑戰一下嗰個，如果佢挑戰一下嗰個佢嘅 client 嘅記憶，或者講下嗰件案其他可能性，咁有冇違反到嗰個方法？即係例如嗰個 defense 講，律師講話，咁因為我睇完愛情動作片，咁我喺地鐵度見到個女仔好靚，咁就我哋睇一下。咁個律師講話。咁其實你點講喺法庭上面，可能只係告邊章咁樣嘅。咁其實會唔會可能係你記錯咗，或者有其他可能？可能當時個地鐵太逼，個女仔噴頭掂到條 cat 嘅，即係佢咁樣挑戰有記憶，佢啲講下其他可能性。咁有冇違反到嗰個規則？
佢應該唯一嗰個標準就係話佢唔可以教人講，佢都唔可以 suggest 佢講，佢 depends on 你頭先嗰句説話。即係如果你如果有人相信呢句説話係你實實實一俾叫佢講大話啦，但係呢個真係要有人澄清，或者去到 court 嗰陣時，呢塊啲地啦，我唔可以就咁講俾你話定，咁就即係呢個唔係我哋個 court 嘅。好，另一位。
即係牽涉到呢個規模嘅或者幾點唔知㗎，即係嗰個 discussion 上面，你覺得個
其實總之你